Hey art historians, welcome back to module 6. We are in unit number 2 and this is week 3. So the title for this unit's materials is module 6, the medieval world part 3. We are looking at medieval Europe 5, 6.04 Gothic art and architecture. And just like I did for Romanesque art and architecture, let's talk a little bit about what Gothic kind of looks like in comparison. So as you remember, when we think of Romanesque art, I always think of a pomegranate. We've got regular old buttresses, really thick walls, and just kind of like rounded, kind of sort of more sturdy structures. But Gothic artwork, they are trying to get closer and closer to heaven, aka JC. So the closer you are to him, the better off you probably are, and that's what the Gothic approach was. So they are now using flying buttresses, so rather than those thick pieces of like columnar brick attached to the side of buildings, instead they are separated by just a little tiny bridge at the top. And this bridge is still effectively pushing those walls together and creating that sturdiness, but without the bulkiness that we saw in the Romanesque era. So Gothic architecture is also going to include taller and thinner walls. We're seeing a lot more stained glass. So rather than those darkened interiors, now we have dark interiors with more playful light happening, kind of invigorates that worship kind of sense. We're also seeing more pointed arches. We're seeing rib vaulting, and I always think of the Gothic construction to be like an asparagus, where we've got Romanesque as the pomegranate, as thick, sturdy, dense, and then we've got the asparagus, which is tall and light and skinny and Gothic. So the works that we're going to be looking at for this era, we've got 6 core works and 6 supplemental works, and these core works have a date range of around 1140 to 1339 CE. The architectural sites include the Cathedral of Saint Denis, the Chartres Cathedral, and the Sainte Chapelle. And last but not least, we of course have smaller scale works, which includes, get ready, the dedication page with Blanche of Castile and King Louis of France. Then we also have the Virgin of John de... gonna butcher the French, d'Hervois, and Christ's side wound in the prayer book of Bon of Luxembourg. And then we have our supplemental works, which includes the Shrine of the Virgin, Matthew Paris's Itinerary, the Rotkin Pietà, the Golden Haggadah, the Ivory Casket of Romances, and the Wilton Diptych. So let's talk a little bit about what some of the Gothic artwork is starting to look like. We are still fully embracing that transept concept, the pilgrims that are moving from place to place to visit all of these relics. And let's discuss relics really quick. These are important pieces that may have belonged or have been confirmed to belong to any major player that is happening in the New Testament. So Mary, Jesus, any of the saints, and these can include simple pieces of clothing. It also can include bones. But people are traveling around to visit these relics to hopefully receive even more blessings than they would by daily going to church or daily going to mass or worship practice within their own area. So we've got a lot of people traveling to kind of embark on these pilgrimages. You can think of it very similarly to the Hajj, which is something that happens in Islam, where people travel to Mecca to visit the Kaaba, which is the, I guess, most religious space for the Islamic people, and they are traveling there as kind of like a gotta do it once in your lifetime sort of thing. And so these pilgrimages are very similar in that way. The Chartres Cathedral is an interesting one. The name always makes my high school students crack up. It's pronounced very French. But it is a really interesting structure because this is holding the relic of the shroud that the Virgin Mary had when she gave birth. This is called the Sancta Camisa. The cathedral actually suffered from a fire, so we can actually see the level of restoration in some images that you'll find where we've got a very darkened view of one of the sides of the transept and then the cleared and cleaned up other side. So you can kind of see that process of restoration. And of course, we have a really important relic here. Now, the other things to mention, we do have some smaller books. We've got this dedication page with a lot of gold leaf being used. This is a really important thing to know. Gold leaf is like very, very, very thin gold. It's even thinner than a piece of paper. It is so delicate and so precious. And so when we see it used in a type of method like the dedication page, that is, of course, implying royalty and wealth. So you want to think about how these books are being commissioned. You know, you can go to Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstore is closest to you and pick up a book. And these were not produced at such a large scale and at such a fast pace. So it is really interesting to see how these books are such precious materials when today they're so commonplace. So adding that level of preciousness to one of our everyday items. Then when we look at our supplemental works, I want to mention the Rotkin Pietà is a really interesting one, so please go ahead and check that one out. It is a small scale sculpture, and it is showing Mary with the deceased Jesus in her arms, and she looks horrified. She is like gaunt, she is pale, and she looks like she's going to pass out. And Jesus has these crazy wounds. It's a very gruesome view of what we know today as the Pietà, which we'll talk more about when we get into the Renaissance. And Mary is actually supposed to know that Jesus will pass away. He will die for all of our sins as told by the Christian religion. And she's supposed to have some sort of sense of foresight in this, and in this example, she does not. So we are seeing raw emotion here, which is really, really interesting and a very cool deviation from the typical view of the Pietà with Mary and Christ. The Golden Haggadah is a Jewish book used during Passover. It is one of the very few Jewish works included in my own curriculum at the high school as well, so it's definitely worth taking a look at, even though it's a supplemental work. All right, folks, that wraps up Gothic art. We are going to move into Arts of Asia next, before returning back to a little bit more medieval, a little bit more indigenous, and then some more Renaissance. So until then, I hope you enjoy. Bye!